Hi everybody, and welcome to today's presentation on achieving enterprise operational excellence. My name is John Verdon. I'm from the Business Technology Center. I'll be your moderator today, and we've got some great information that's going to be brought to you through a brilliant business person that we all know here, Mike Holland. And but before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about some housekeeping stuff here. So we'd love to have you get social. We got some social links above that you can participate in with Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Let us know what your thoughts. Some of those thoughts might be controversial. Feel free to pose them. You have some links down there for Mike. You can get connected with Mike through Twitter, LinkedIn, and really leverage those social links to really get active in this community. But it's all about having a conversation, right? So we want to hear from you during the webinar. We want you to get social. We want you to pose those questions. We'll be watching for them. If you want to ask a question during the presentation, go ahead and throw that into the chat window in your GoToMeeting console there, and I'll go ahead and moderate those questions. I'll bring them up to Mike as we go on, so that we're getting those asked in a timely yet organized way. So with that, I want to go ahead and introduce Mike Holland. Mike Holland, like I'd mentioned, is a great friend of ours. Mike owns the Management Advisory Systems Corporation, and he's a great business person, has been involved in many different organizational restructures and helped a lot of people along the way. But without blowing through all of Mike's credentials here, you can read them on the screen. I just want to go ahead and turn it over to Mike so that Mike can go ahead and get started with today's presentation. Mike, I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter, and you can take it from here. Does that work for you?
Yeah, John, thank you. And thanks for the kind words and the introduction. I'm just about to share the screen here. Okay, just to double check, John, are you able to see the screen?
Absolutely, Mike. Looks lovely.
Okay, lovely. Oh, great. Thank you. All right, folks. Well, good morning or afternoon as your time zone permits. Today we're going to talk about some warning signs that your project is going to fail. And during the presentation, we're going to talk about 5 of the most common reasons for failure or indications of failure. And we're going to talk about them and delve into 3 areas for each of the top 5. Number 1 is, what are the symptoms of failure? So when we're in the middle of a project, what are some of the things that tell us that we're going to fail? And then the second thing are, what are some immediate steps that we can take to mitigate the risk of failure? And then the last part for each of these 5 warning signs is, we'll talk about how do we fix them, for a long-term, from a long-term perspective. So we've got a lot of stuff to go through. We've got some templates, we've got some quotes, we've got some real-life stories to talk about. So let's jump into it. A lot of times, we come into these projects and we start thinking, we get into groupthink. Everybody's excited about, let's say, buying new technology or implementing a new business process or bringing a new team on board or launching a new global initiative. So a lot of times we get into these situations and everybody's so invested in the success of the project that we think it's going to succeed, and we'll make guarantees to the board or whoever. But let's think about that again. Here's some projects where that happened, that people were backslapping and, wow, guys, we're doing great, everything's really wonderful, but they were dismal failures. Healthcare.gov, if you remember when that was first launched, was a complete failure, their website. They've managed to fix those problems over a year or so, but there's still issues. But they didn't see the warning signs, and they didn't do some stuff prior to the launch of that site that could have saved a lot of embarrassment. BBC, digital archive system. So they wanted to have an archive, quote, online archive of all of their digital content. They spent 6 years and about 12 million USD, 8 million pounds. They never went into test mode. JCPenney, merchandising and pricing strategy. They spent 2 years working on this beautiful strategy, and because of some of the warning signs that we're going to talk about, they lost $1 billion worth of revenue. And it's basically because they had no stakeholder involvement. JP Morgan, $6 billion they lost in portfolio revenue and customer fees because they tried to use Microsoft Excel improperly for modeling. Once again, they had lack of participation from stakeholders, and they got into this groupthink that Excel was the best solution when maybe it wasn't. State of California, 2 years failed SAP project, $254 million. And why? Because they just didn't pay attention to signs that the project was going to fail. So anyway, not to start off on a negative note, but just to say that, you know, if you've had failed projects or you're in the middle of a project that's showing some of these warning signs, you aren't alone. And when I researched this, I had to pick 5 of about 500 projects to illustrate these points. So lots of project failures. So what are the top 5 warning signs? One, and the reason it's a number 1 is because there's a communication breakdown between team members. Rarely do projects fail solely because we're using the wrong tools, or we're using the wrong technology, or we've got the wrong vendors. Mostly projects fail, A, because you don't recognize warning signs early enough on, and second is there's breakdown in communication between the project participants. Poorly attended project meetings, executive sponsor absence. You know, how many times do we launch a project, for example, a CRM project, and the vice president of sales and marketing never shows up to the meetings or isn't involved in the design? That's an issue. We have project meetings that people don't attend because something else has hit their calendar that's a higher priority. Vendor delivery team delays. When we pick vendors and we don't manage the vendors closely, sometimes they delay on their side, which causes our projects to delay. And excuse me, that's a common occurrence. Short-term milestones. Lots of times we'll say, well, you know, we didn't get that particular piece of work done by Friday. We'll do it on Monday. All of a sudden, you accumulate enough short-term milestones that you've missed, and all of a sudden, your long-term goals and milestones are at risk. And then the last indicator of potential project failure is short-term budget overruns. And we've got tools and techniques that we're going to show you throughout this presentation, and that we'll make available to people that have attended the presentation, that'll show you how to manage and control those issues. So what are some of the common causes? Again, these are causes, not necessarily warning signs. By the time we have these failures, it's almost too late. So when we want to look at what causes projects to fail, we have leadership and governance issues, organization and planning, marketing and strategy. Marketing strategy failures refers to both internal and external market. Our internal market is within our organization. Externally could be customers, vendors, or parts of our supply chain. Engagement, skills, risk, quality failures, underestimation and analysis failures. I'm not going to go into each of these deeply, but you'll see these kinds of ideas reinforced throughout our webcast here today. So the first one is we've got one of the top 5. Number 1 is communication breakdown between team members. So I doubt, and when we do these presentation and training sessions in person, it's always funny to ask what political issues exist within an organization. And it's funny because a lot of our sessions will have people from the chairman of the board down to data entry clerk, let's say. And, you know, when I first posed the question, I said, you know, we've done these projects for years. There's a lot, you know, we've hundreds of companies and people, thousands of people, and most of them had a political agenda. Somebody had a political agenda. I said, but I'm sure that doesn't exist here. And then all of a sudden the snickers start turning into laughter. And it's very interesting to see how different levels in the organization react to that. And what happens are these couple of things. We start to see, and this, you know, it's different for large and small organizations. A small organization, we're just working with on a strategic planning project. It was a sole owner of a 100-year-old company that said many times, look, I don't want to drive or influence the discussion. I let my people talk. In that meeting, nobody talked. So they all looked to this guy and say, well, what do you think? So we had, it was hard to get some involvement from people, other folks within the meeting. On the other hand, we've had large global projects where we have individual spheres of influence for different departments, different regions, different companies within the organization, and their only focus was, how can I make sure I keep my job, and how can I make sure that my political goals are achieved? So lots of stuff with politics, and generally politics will cause communication breakdown. And then we have end customers aren't involved in emails and phone calls go unanswered. I think I kind of addressed that. What immediate steps do we take? We get together as a group, look at the original project goals, because at some point in time, the organization said, we're doing this for a reason. We're going to save money. We're going to increase revenue. We're going to decrease turnover. We're going to shorten the time from creating a product till it gets on the store shelves. If you have a face-to-face meeting to discuss those original goals, it'll go a long way towards opening those communication channels back up. And then as a project leader or a top executive in the organization or a facilitator, it's really good to have individual discussions with the project participants to make sure that their issues are being addressed and so on. So that's when you first, I'm going to back up one slide. When you see these symptoms, take these immediate steps. And then as you're taking these immediate steps, at the same time, start applying some of these fixes. And these are the three things I told you that we're going to talk about for each of the five issues. So send out an anonymous survey. 5 questions, takes me 2 minutes to answer. What's wrong with our project? Are your needs being met? Do you feel your job is being threatened? You can ask some pretty telling questions in those surveys and make sure that you get some feedback without the barrier of other folks involved. Internalize political goals. So if for example, if I'm working on a project now, so I'm the vice president of sales and marketing, I want to sell product, I want to get it to market quickly, and I want to make sure that my sales reps are happy. If I'm the vice president of production scheduling, my first thing is going to be sales doesn't know anything about making a product, blah blah blah. So we've got inherent conflict within an organization, not necessarily bad, but it always exists, and there's political goals for each of those departments. It could be anything from promotion to bonuses, etc. So we need to take those goals and make sure that they're in sync with the project and in sync with the overall organizational goals. Face-to-face meetings are critical. It's harder to hide behind your computer when you're sitting in a room talking to people face-to-face, and I can't stress that enough. And then communicate project risk to all participants. So when we see that there's communication breakdown, we absolutely need to let all the participants know what the impact of that breakdown is. The second thing, Poorly attended project meetings, executive sponsor absence. I mentioned earlier. We get loss of interest. We have excuses for missing project meetings. The executive sponsor or project owner. We had a large CRM project, 3,000 users globally, and the CEO of the organization never went to a meeting. So when we had some adoption problems 60 days in, the CEO finally said, you know what, I think if I send out a global video to all users, adoption will increase, and it did. Unfortunately, he didn't do that at the beginning. So what do we do immediately? We have one-on-one meetings. We communicate with each participant. Why aren't you attending the meetings? And other. I'm hesitating. I don't want to use the excuses, but maybe it's the right word. And then we talk about the visit. You know, what's the value of these meetings and the frequency? Well, if we have a project team meeting for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, it's a waste of time. So you need to make sure you're cognizant of the value of time to the meeting participants. How do we fix it? Formalize the meeting process, agenda and feedback mechanisms. Lots of times somebody will send out an Outlook calendar invite, for example, and say, we're meeting for a project status meeting. Well, if you spend the first 20 minutes of the meeting figure out what the agenda is, it's a waste of everybody's time. So formalizing it, and the level of formalization depends on the organization, but putting some formal structure in place, eliminating the number of full team meetings, and continuously reconfirming the original project goals with the executive sponsor will help address poorly attended meetings. Vendor delivery team delays. Weekly, and I'm going to go through these couple quickly because I've got templates that I want to show you that help address these. So we have project management, vendor staff, and our own internal participants are complaining, more than usual of course, about vendor participation. So hey, it could be as simple as the vendor isn't getting paid on time, or you know, the vendor doesn't have qualified people, or you know, I use the term vendor, you know, as an all-encompassing someone outside of the organization. So we go back with the vendor, take a look at the statement of work and their progress. Then we switch, if we're not already in that mode, for payments and deliverables approval will be withheld. And then we meet with the vendor's owner or key management to confirm the continuation of the project. This is an immediate step. You need to draw a line in the sand and say, hey, you guys are not performing. Nothing really rocket science on this one, but lots of times, let's say a vendor only invoices you every 30 days. Well, you may not realize until 30 days have gone by, you know, they invoice you 30 days and give you 30 days to pay. By the time it hits the person's desk who's, you know, signing the check, it's 60 days after a potential problem could have surfaced. So we need to keep close watch on that. We'll show you how. Weekly reporting, tie payments to project goals, change project manager from the vendor if required. Here's the template I mentioned. There's lots of stuff in here. We've only got about less than 10 minutes left, so I'll just hit the highlights. We've got, this is Excel. We've got a reporting period. This particular template is from a real project. I've changed the dates and some of the numbers, but I had our vendor for this particular project design this reporting template. So we've got links to other workbooks, issues, risks, change requests, T&E detail. We have different work streams and so on. Overall status, budget, schedule, scope. We can see that's red, yellow, or green. We look at the labor percentage complete and balance that against the original forecast and the expenditures to date. So if you can see on this particular one, we have a negative 1.2% variance, which is good in a project of this magnitude. We have some overall status comments, high-level activities completed this period, and what we're planning for next period. So anyway, this gives a snapshot to whoever's running the project or responsible for completion we can quickly look at those things that proactively that make indicate vendor delivery team delays. Short-term milestones. I mentioned this in the beginning. Small and short-term tasks are not completed. We don't see progress, and issues and risks are increasing on the weekly report. This is really important. A lot of times we're everybody's, oh, so-and-so went on vacation, they'll get to it next week. The phrase, they'll get to it next week, is really, really dangerous. And enough of those things accumulate during the early stages of the project, it's almost impossible to catch up. So what do? Is our schedule reasonable? Well, sometimes, and we had this about a year ago, CEO of a new company that had been acquired from by a venture capital firm. We were engaged by the VC firm to help manage the integration of the companies. CEO of one of the acquiring companies said, I don't care what you do, but we need our new ERP system live January 1st. And this was October. His whole team said we can't do it. They were going through many, many other projects in transitions. Their schedule was unreasonable. The resources they had to assign to it were unreasonable. And it took them a failure to find out that 3 months for a global organization is not enough time to put in an ERP system, no matter how important and powerful you are in the organization. So what do? We did these 3 things. I just said immediate steps. We started to require documented deliverables from the vendors and from the project team internally. We had the key stakeholder sign-off for all milestones. In this particular case, we came into that ERP project in December. The VC firm asked us to come in and find out why it was failing. And these are the fixes that we were able to apply. And then that weekly status report that I showed earlier, we implemented in that project as well, and that got us and them back on track. Short-term budget overruns. Late vendor payments, delayed decisions by this executive sponsor, and we get kickbacks from the invoice, from finance. Short-term budget overruns are important because unless they're resolved in the underlying reason, it's hard to recover, and by the end of the, or by 3/4 through the project, you have to go back to the well again for more money, and that's almost never a good idea. So what do? We go back to the vendor's statement of work. We look at what's our internal time charged against the project and make sure that that's being tracked properly. We review the budget tracking module and identify the specific lines that are causing overruns. It could be T&E, it could be, some of these projects we have outside PMs that, cost an arm and a leg, and it's hard to quantify what they do, so without using some of these templates. So all these things we pay attention to weekly. When I say short-term, weekly budget overruns. So what do? Weekly goals-based budget. Weekly billing from vendors is the most important thing that you can do to prevent budget overruns, at least from expenditures and outside resources. And then forecast to complete as well as detailed 1 week hours, dollars forecast from all participants, internal and external. So if you saw on this particular template, you could see where we report period labor costs, current period forecast, change request, actuals, etc. So this is an ongoing weekly report that helps us to forecast in advance if we're going to have a budget overrun. Segue into a weekly status report that I had mentioned earlier. This gives a little detail underlying that high-level budget report. What did we complete this period? What are we going to do next period? This is a week. Our high-level issues, risks, or support, and our high-level status. So schedule, budget, resources, and infrastructure. And again, for those of you that attend, I'll be happy to share these templates so you have a working copy. Another high-level, board level in a large organization, project phase status report that we issue are just that. Pilot, our environments, our foundation planning and design, and then detailed design. So we can give the whole project team quick visibility into where we are at, percentage complete, and what the status is. By the way, all these templates and everything that we're talking about, we usually publish on an intranet site within the client's organization, so all the team members have appropriate access. We also have, just through a very basic schedule into here of what's coming up, start and status notes, not rocket science, but very important to maintain on a weekly basis. This other template that you're seeing on the screen now is a detailed risk register that rolls up to the high-level status report I showed you earlier in that Excel sheet. So you can see there's 6 or 7 risks that we had identified for this particular project, and you can see the detail and what our mitigation was. I took the owner names off to protect the innocent. So it's important that anything that hits the risk register has a risk mitigation or some type of action associated with it. So what do we take away from today? A lot of content real fast. Sorry about that. For those that you have attended, we can follow up, and I'll be happy to expand on some of these ideas. But if you don't remember anything else from today, or as you're looking through this presentation or listening to it in the future, think of these 5 things. Formal project management procedures and tools. We've shown you what those are today. It's important to formalize it. If you're a tie-dye t-shirt manufacturer, your level of formalization will be different than an industrial steel manufacturer. But formalization is important. Proactive. How are we proactive? Weekly, weekly, weekly. Communication with all participants is regular, consistent, and valuable. Face-to-face meetings, intranet project website, easy communication, access, and information availability is critical. Budget tracking, weekly budget tracking. Weekly budget tracking. We've identified in the project goals almost always ROI measures to track against, weekly tracking against ROI measures. And then using that weekly status report template plus some of the underlying detail that I didn't show you, and make sure that we get valid feedback from all the key participants to update that report, gives us a snapshot of where we're at in the project. With that, we're at 30 minutes, and I'd like to thank you. I know time is valuable. I would like to thank you for sitting through, listening, and seeing some of the things that we use to identify and mitigate and fix the top 5 warning signs that you have some potential project issues. So with that, John, I'll throw it back to you to close, and thank you all once again.
Hey, fantastic, Mike. Appreciate that. Thanks for all that very valuable information that you brought for us, all that attended on this call, as well as that very generous offer to make these templates available for offline download and working with you. But you know what, everybody on this call, you've got Mike's contact information up on the screen. Go ahead and use it and get connected with Mike. I know Mike has always been there for us, and I know Mike will be there for you too. He's got a lot of great experience in projects and helping clients manage their way through these projects. So he can help everybody. With that, Mike, thanks a ton. Appreciate it. Thanks to everybody on the call for attending today's conversation. I don't see any questions or comments in our chat window, so nothing to discuss there. And with that, Mike, have a great day.
You too. Thanks, John. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye now.